I hope you had a pleasant lunch. Uh, Currently in Kigali, it's very hot. We are in our dry season. So I'm really having the time of my life with the low temperature. My bones are shaking. So my presentation will, I prepare a presentation keeping in mind that some of the speakers will be mostly touching on tools and some of the analysis they are doing. But I chose to take a slightly different path because I'm expecting from this session that we raised one question that we normally don't think about, and that is a question or let's say a thought that I will share in the end. But first, let's put a bit of context into the urban water resilience in Africa. So for the World Resource Institute, I lead our urban resilience portfolio over Africa, and I focus very much on climate resilience. And in the context of Africa, as we will see, climate resilience is mostly translated into water-related issue. So really addressing that really goes into addressing water resilience. Now, cities are units that are mostly defined as opportunities centers, where you have a lot of jobs and a lot of people going there for better socioeconomic life. But at the same time, these are the highest point of GHG emissions. And what we've seen globally is mostly in the South, is a deep and growing inequity in how the cities are developing. But again, cities attract a lot of people because it's a conglomerate of also pull factor. You have buildings, transportation, electricity, water in some of these cities, and these are things that attract people. But one thing that is mostly not very much considered when we talk about city is the fact that these cities, despite being administrative units, they are located into hydrological units and into natural ecosystems, and they have really huge impact on this system, on how they develop. And on the other hand, we are looking at a massive increase in urban population by 2050 globally. And the observation here is without some sort of systemic change on how urbanization developed globally, achieving our climate goals and sustainable development will just be a dream. Now, what does this mean for Africa? Urbanization in Africa is characterized by rapid growth, but at the same time unplanned growth, which brings in quite a number of challenges. And most of it comes into development of slums, and therefore an increasing number of residents in vulnerable situation, mostly to water-related risk, which in the end exacerbated by climate change. So we are looking into over half of the population of Africa in urban areas living in slums or informal settlement. And we are also looking at a serious gap in terms of infrastructure to really provide the services that are needed. If we put this into perspective on water, what we are looking at here is a projection of almost 1 billion people living in Africa by 2050. This is around 25 years to come. And this translates, if the current growth and the current scenarios keep, it's not unchanged, we are looking into a 300% increase in water demand. And in this figure, the biggest component of it relies on water resilience to disasters. So the more we increase, the more disaster people will face. And we are already seeing that all over Africa. So the current situation we have in Africa is too much and too little water at the same time. Some cities are facing too much water, tremendous drought, floods, and other cities are facing some serious drought. And then in the middle, you also have cities that are facing both at the same time. And in addition to that, I added 2 more pictures on my right, which will be on your left. There is some serious misuse of water across cities in Africa that is not helping at all in the situation we're facing. So this is the current picture in Africa, and the most concerning part here is that this is increasing over time. It's not a situation that is reducing despite all the technological efforts, the research, and the knowledge that is out there. We're still having this issue. So then the rationale here is why this is continuing. So what we did to really organize our work as WRI in Africa, we had to dive deep into what is the context as far as water resilience is concerned in urban Africa, and what are the key observations that we got out of it. And to summarize this info, this is a report that is available on our website. You can please go visit it. There's a lot of information in. But what we realized, if I could summarize, is that informal settlement really is a key component to how our cities are structured. And when we talk about informal settlement, don't just keep in mind slums. Slums is just an informal settlement that is full of, I would say, residents with a socioeconomic status that is low. But even in our neighborhood that we consider, let's say, exemplary, most of them are in informality. When you look at it from an engineering perspective, when you look at it from a climate resilience perspective, most of them are in informality. And this is why sometimes when we have flooding, they are also affected. So, and this is why they constitute the biggest portion of our cities. Now, what we also realize, like I was saying before, water resilience is really at the center of ensuring climate resilience as a whole, or urban resilience in general in Africa, in African cities. Because of that, I would say, cross-cutting nature of water, but also, I would say climate change impact really is mostly characterizing in African cities in terms of water-related risk. And the thinking through it on how to address it requires really to have some sort of innovative strategies that are hybrid and inclusive, but also that consider the current context and have an incremental approach in improving the current situation. So the situation in Africa is not a situation where to solve the cities, you literally have to destroy everything and build new cities from scratch. That is not possible. So we really need to come with solutions that adapt to the context and improve as we go on. But this improvement again becomes challenging because of how fast our cities are growing, and like the first presenter was referring to on how the landscape changes tremendously in Africa. So this incremental improvement needs really to be very innovative on how we do it. And also there's a strong need on multifunctional infrastructure. And this is why some of the work we are doing really focuses on the intersection between green and grey infrastructure for stormwater management, wastewater management, and things like rainwater harvesting. So really when we diving into the context and the pathway needed to really ensure, I would say, an urban resilient status for our cities, we summarize this in four points. And this was a series of consultation with decision makers, key stakeholders in cities, community, to really understand where do we need to focus on to help African cities transition to a development that is water resilient and therefore climate resilient. And the first point was planning for water. So many of the presentations that I've seen today on the tools that are there, the technologies and the way a new framework of thinking really respond to planning for water, because understanding the risk that you face is actually a big part into solving them. The second part, prioritizing the most vulnerable. I've also seen some presentation around tools that really engage the community, which is good. There is also something very, I would say, important in this. But the idea here is not only for vulnerable community, is not only about their security against risk, but it's also addressing the basic needs for water. And in these particular cases where things like rainwater harvesting becomes really, really important. There is the third one around governance and institutional innovation. And this is actually one point that I would like to touch on, because in many of the development that are going on, governance and institutional innovation still lag behind a little bit. And the last one, of course, is finance. But here we are looking into getting the finance right. It's not just mobilizing money, but it's actually mobilizing money for the right reason and in the right way. And in this case, one parameter that is around this is sustainability of investment. That is the biggest problem, because sustainability means you invest now, but how do you maintain, how do you operate your, the investment that you make? That's why we are looking into getting the finance right. Now, focusing on institution, I'd like to focus a little bit on decision makers and politicians in this instance. So one realization we have is that decision makers at different levels of government really have they play a very important role, and the decisions they make really have a serious impact on the people and community we want to protect. But often we have a sort of disconnect between the water scientists in this particular instance. I'm looking at hydrologists and the decision makers. And this disconnect, I think many colleagues have touched upon it. Communication, how do we communicate with them? Is that whatever is being produced in terms of knowledge is not really resonating to decision makers. There are many, I would say, assessments that point to the fact that there is an issue of governance in some extent, but really the issue of governance is not really, I would say, the key, because in some situations where decision makers in any countries really resonate with the priorities, we've seen action being taken. I'll give an example of COVID-19, for example. Many countries in the South has been able to adapt to it in very, I would say, astonishing way, because this is a priority that resonated with decision makers, despite the challenges of governance they had. So this is really an example of an indication that it's not really about governance, but if this resonates clearly with decision makers, there are some action that can be taken. And at the moment, what we've seen is that the hydrological communities, whether we are surface hydrologists, whether we are hydrogeologists, whether we are hydrologists and so on, climatologists, we are in a certain bubble where the knowledge, the model, the tools, the results we produce really resonate within among the community, but the outside world is really not connecting with what we've seen. And to what we've seen sometimes in regional forums, you have some politicians using this confusion to their advantage and creating even more chaos and less actions. For example, if for those of you who participate in COPs, you'll realize how difficult it is to make a decision while people actually die, because those that are making the decision are not really connected to what the scientific world, what the water scientists, what the environmentalists are saying. So to be practical, this is the reality at the moment, and we still have an increasing impact because the decisions that are being made by decision makers are not really connected to what the science is telling us. Now, for this particular slide, I'd like to be a bit more pragmatic, and this is where really I would like, I'm expecting that with the GF in this conference and the network, we will be able to think about it. We need a new breed, or let's say increasing a breed of scientists that are a bridge between decision makers and the typical hydrologist of the hydrology community. And in all the, I would say, through the experience and through the experience that we have dealing with decision makers, dealing with scientific community and all that, to really trigger action on the ground, we've realized that there is a need to have people that are equipped with the ability to understand what the scientists are saying, really grasp the information, but also be able to communicate that in the language that decision makers understand. I've met a few over the past, hydropolitician, hydroeconomist. But if you look at them, they were not trained as such, but they have been exposed through their career to both words, and in the end, they've come up to develop the skills that they really act as a bridge between these two, I would say these two groups. But this is, I think, a call to the academic community, whereby we really need to put strength into this type of, I would say, hydrologists. Let me focus on hydrologists on this, in this particular extent. You'll see that water diplomacy, for example, water conflict resolutions, these are skills that are growing in need, and there is limited people or limited expertise out there. Hydroeconomy people who are really equipped with, I would say, the skills to look into a microeconomic analysis of a country and really pin it to what it means in terms of water resources and vice versa. How does it affect, and how does it communicate that to politicians? These skills are lacking. And in the end, this will still affect how we communicate and how we link our work and our knowledge products to the decision makers. And in the end, how does this trigger adequate decision making? We had a couple of examples and countries that have really tried to have this mix of group in some of the reforms they've done. And really some very good and promising outcome has come out of this. And this has come again to strengthen the need for our academic institution and I would say training centers to really focus on developing this type of skills where you have people not only focus on developing very complex hydrological models, but those who can read them and communicate them in the right way. I will stop here for now to not take that much time, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Marc. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much for the presentation. Mine is experience sharing on bridging the gap between hydromed community and the politicians. And at times it doesn't require you to go to any additional capacity building skills acquisition. You have to learn on the job. As a scientist or focus producers, you're dealing with politicians as your supervising minister. So the approach we adopted, as I was discussing with a colleague during lunch, was to key into the government thrust of the day. Politicians always want results easily and showcase that. So if you do the forecast and gather at scientific meetings and invite stakeholders and broadcast it, it doesn't carry much political weight. But by the time you develop like national level outlook and you allow the minister to unveil, so he takes the credit and you get the job and the information disseminated to the users. And with that, you are doing win-win situation, whereby he will support you more because you are giving him more credibility and he's more visible. And that can make him also go and get more budget for you with the parliaments. And it has worked in some few countries in Africa. And I think it's a good way to go. Thank you. But this gap really exists, whereby scientists always think that the solution is always on the table. And I think we need to create that two-way communication. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your sharing. Actually, you're very right. And I personally also have this experience where when I was in the government, and the minister is exactly what you're saying. And one of the challenges was when you're predicting, like the case the colleague from IOC gave for Rwanda on the disaster that took 100 plus lives. These are predictions we did 5 years ago. And we had the models and we're like, if we continue to develop this way, we have this risk. But it has never resonated with the decision makers because the language is still not there. So the other part as well, for example, if you look into the International Water Association, they have developed this program they call Young Water Professional, And the intent of such a program is actually to start to expose young people into this type of situation at an early stage, so that by the time they're in their mid-career, they're already fully equipped with an experience like that. Because currently, there is many of those experts we have are reaching retirement age, and there is a huge gap into the next generation to fill in those shoes. But I believe it takes a lot of time already to be an anthropologist. So the call here to academic institutions is really to fast track that and start producing these experts that have this hybrid knowledge. And at least when they get to the job, it will be easy for them to acquire the experience they need and then start to engage this. But I fully agree with you. At the moment, this is what we use, but the future we really need to see how to fast track that. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. Mine, I want just to ask you a small question concerning there's a prediction that the year 2050, most population will be living in the cities, the year 2050. Now, what's your plan as an expert? All of the advice you can give our governments? You know, we don't need to depend on politicians. We need to depend on experts. So, what advice will you give to our government, especially in Africa? Thank you.
Now, the increment in the statistics I show you are based on models that assume that the current projection and growth in terms of population growth, socioeconomic development, and urban-rural migration stay the same. And if you do that in your model, you end up with alarming figures. And the other reality actually that you have behind these numbers, it's not the city itself growing, it's actually the peri-urban area and the slums growing around the city. So that comes into a lot of unplanned and rapid growth, but also uncontrolled. So for cities to do, one of the, I would say, advice that we have, and I think some of the countries are adopting it, is really this traditional way of planning urban development needs to change. And it has to be extremely, when I say extremely, I have to emphasize on that, it has to be extremely community-centric and equitable. So the idea would be, you have to keep in mind that the people that live in slums, the reason why they're there is they are closer to activities that generate a certain income for them. So while you want to, let's say, put them in a better situation, the idea of taking them, moving them somewhere else, not that it has failed in many cities. But the idea is actually to develop, improve their situation on the spot. And this needs some serious engagement. Now, like the gentleman pointed out, most of the politicians, their term is around 4 to 5 years. It's a very short time, and these guys need action yesterday. Whatever he has funding to do that, taking time to sit down and discuss with the community is not in their priority. This is a guy who will jump tomorrow, destroy half of it, and then move. So, and in the next morning, people will come back again and reconstruct in the same cell. So really, that period, one of the things that we're trying to do with decision makers is to make them understand that even if you spend 2 years sitting with the community and agreeing on what to do, will actually save you time and money, rather than coming and spending every year the same amount for the same effort without solving an issue. So that would be one of the focus, engagement at community level a lot. Thank you.
Hi, I had a question around the challenge with the cities, particularly in that a lot of them already have like the waterways blocked. So definitely you did say that it's not possible to destroy the cities and restart from scratch. So what are some of the solutions that you're hearing that are possible to, try and salvage the challenge or at least reduce those kind of challenges?
Yeah, thank you very much. The biggest blockage at the moment that we have in many cities has to do around with poor solid waste management. And you have, and in most of the slums, stormwater drainage are a very good and effective way to get rid of their waste, especially when it's raining. I know in my city, for example, in Kigali, that happened. When it's raining a lot, you have people coming and throwing waste because it's just go. But downstream, it's creating a lot of problems. And when you look into waste management, it is expensive, even though the city tried to minimize the cost. For some citizens, it's really easy to afford. But when you look into slums, it's really expensive. So there is some sort of mechanisms that the city's leadership need to put in place. Again, that's touch on equity, whereby those who can afford need to make a little bit of effort to actually help also those who can't afford it. But solid waste, I would say, if well done, assuming that it's really correct, would solve around 70% of the issue of blockage. The rest is about how rapidly the city is growing and how the conveyance capacity of those channels adapt to that. And this is why when we are, in what we're doing, we are combining that remaining, I would say 30% with nature-based solution to really have this infrastructure really resilient and easy to adapt to the change. It's still a long way to go, but the good news is you have cities and some of the slums, for example, in Nairobi, that have adopted this. It's really working, and it's actually quite simple to do if the right decision are made. Thank you.
One more question.
Yeah.
So it's a question. It comes from ignorance. Perhaps picking at Kigali as an example, do you have is land tenure and ownership formalized? Is land use planning as a system, is that formalized? Are there written guidance for what the city wants to achieve in different areas as it grows? And then are there specific bits of guidance on, I want to build a block of flats or houses or something somewhere? Is there guidance on how to do that so that you don't worsen risk elsewhere? Is that system in place?
Thank you very much. So actually, Rwanda, I would say, is doing, not because I'm from there, but it's doing pretty good in terms of that. So all the land in Rwanda are registered, all of it 100%. There's a system in place, and the last, I think the 2021 statistic from the World Bank in terms of land administration, Rwanda was ranked the 3rd best country in the world on that, because everything is there, the system is updated. And if you look into national land use planning, that one I should know because I led the national land use planning, the recent one. I was the one leading that in 2019 to 2020 when I was in the government. And so every piece of land in Rwanda is specifically assigned to a development. And the strategy is to put that in to implement that are in place. Now, the challenge for Rwanda still remains, how now do we adapt to the current situation and progressively implement that? Because in some of the area where you don't have development, it's very easy to block development and go on what the plan says. But in other area where, let's say in an informal settlement where you have this, there has been different approaches that the government has tried, like relocating people, which has created a lot of trouble to implement and a lot of dissatisfaction from communities. Now they're shifting towards on-site upgrading of informal settlement. But the challenge as well with that is that some of the informal settlement are located into areas that are not supposed to be settlement. So there is still, it's very challenging to adapt, but there are some very promising initiatives that are coming, especially some on condominium housing that we are copying from Addis Ababa, for example, and adapting to the context of Kigali, that are really proving to be very beneficial and seems to be promising.
So in Rwanda, it sounds like you're ahead of the game.
Yeah.
When you work very well, would you say that that's a company experience or something that's exception?
There are exceptions. As far as planning is concerned, policy in place. If you take the example of Nairobi, Nairobi is the city and a country that has the best law and the best policy in the world. Implementation of those and enforcement is another story. If I would compare Kigali, let's say if I would compare Rwanda to Kenya, Kenya has the best law policies written. Rwanda does its best, but the enforcement in Rwanda is really high compared to Kenya. And that has a tremendous impact when you compare the two. Some countries like in DRC, even the policies are not there yet. And there are some countries that are somewhere in a gray area that people haven't really decoded properly. Countries like Tanzania, they have a very complex way of working that it's not easy to really understand unless you're inside, you're part of it, but it seems to work as well. They seem to really developing well. In Uganda, you'll have what you're reading in the report, which is not what you see in the reality. I don't know why even in their planning, when they seem to plan, they tend to not really based on what is on the ground. And most of the time, it's not working. They seems to be stuck in a loop. And you have a country like South Sudan. I would say it's a pretty new country. So they are navigating with different issues at the same time. But they have some really, really good engineers doing work. So they have, in South Sudan, for example, what you will see is that despite the lack of policies and plans, they have this community level adaptation capacity that is really impressive if you compare to the level they are and the need they have. And it's actually making quite more results compared to countries that seems to be stable for quite a long time. So and that's the beauty with the work that we do. Africa is very complex. Every city has a complexity, and what we're trying to do, and I think this is something that we could also be working very hard together with this forum, is to understand that the tools that we're developing, when you look at it on a regional perspective, will give you an image that might help you, but you shouldn't count on. Because if you take those tools and apply to each country context, the more you dive in, the more it becomes completely different one another, and it becomes very difficult to take one tool at regional level and try to convince a group of politicians to make decisions out of it. And this is, I would say, if you look at discussion in COP and many of the UN-related discussion, it has been a challenge when we're dealing with global models. Because one leader will tell you, this is not my case, the other one will be like, yeah, this is for me. And if you put in a little bit of political interest on it, some of them will support it for different reasons. And in the end, the victim is still the community. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Marc. We have to move on. So hold your question for the break. So thank you. All right. I think we have come to an end with the plenary talks. So we're going to move on, and let's see if I can get to the agenda. We're thinking big. Where is my agenda? Is it there? I just don't see it. Oh, thank you. Man, not only jet lagged in the new class or something. This is not helping. All right, so we are at 1 o'clock, very good. So at the poster introductions, so the way this works, this is not obligatory, but this is an opportunity. So we have a list of posters somewhere, yes, here they are. And so by now, if all worked out, those that are presenting posters, the posters are out there, but this is your opportunity to, in maximum 2 minutes, to indicate what your poster is about and to create an interest. And so if you want to say a little thing about your poster, I would like to go down this list and give people the opportunity, starting with Samuel, to tell a little bit more about your poster. So, Samuel, I'm not sure where you're sitting, if you're even in the room, but this is your time to come up if you want. And if not, yes, the first Samuel, right, yes, we're starting here. And speakers come to the front. Okay, who wants to talk about his or her poster should come up here to the front. And I see Neil is spearheading, very good. And more are coming. That's the way it often works. Thank you, Neil. Don't be shy. So we have all the speakers for the posters here up front. Then I'm gonna start working from the left. We're gonna end up with you if that's fine with you. One more person I see. Please don't take more than 2 minutes, because otherwise we're standing here till midnight, right? So I'm gonna hand over the microphone. You can say something about your poster to remind people to get to your poster.
Okay, my name is James Nabola. I'm from Hopeo, Kenya. It's an NGO where we deal with water-related issues. On my poster, it's about water disaster management. And what I'm looking at is water is a precious commodity which gives basic life to plants and animals. And this same water, if it is contaminated, it becomes harmful, and out of the harmful effects, there are waterborne diseases. So in developing countries, there's an issue and waterborne diseases. When precautions are taken, measures are taken both locally and internationally by the Ministry of Water, and also with donor funding, we are able to assist communities, and we are able to empower them to be able to get access to clean water, because even getting access to clean water is one of the UN SDGs, and it promotes human dignity.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ahmed Limola Otepo. I'm from Benin, and the title of my posters is Flood Risk Management and Rural Development using Remote Sensing Approach in Niger, precisely in the Niger River. So the contents of this, yes, we collect the different data, the drivers from people, those who are living close to the river, And also we designed a map, a flood risk map, and also contribute to the how people can first of all can access data as well, and also can know how they can stay in this area. And also we realize that people, those who are living in the downstream, are really affected with the floods, because we have a lot of rainy season in the upstream. And yes, we have a lot of data to share, and also a lot of primary data to share. So I'm just in front, and thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Nishad. I'm a data science and machine learning expert working at IGA Climate Prediction and Application Center. So my poster is about DevOps. It is a software concept, how we can make a hydrological model into a working software. So there is another bonus poster also I have. So anyone know Daniel Kahneman, who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow? He's a Nobel laureate in psychology and behavioral economics and decision making specifically. So if you are connecting the last presentation, a gentleman from WRA presented, it is about the decision making. So Daniel Kahneman, he very recently passed away. He has a very a quote. He has the quote is like this: no one took a decision based on a number. They need a story. So this bonus poster, we will be introducing about storylines, event-based storylines, which can be used to generate risk knowledge, and which can be used for decision making in disaster risk management through impact-based forecasting. So we'll be discussing about that. So I invite to that poster. Thank you.
My name is John Kisi from Ghana, the Welcome Authority. Let me be honest, when I received an invitation to do a poster presentation, I wasn't keen. I said that I did poster presentations when I was an undergrad, so I've grown past it. But I decided to do it anyway, and my experience of getting my poster here made me to want to display it anyway. On the flight, I was holding my poster, and the flight attendant said, "Oh, let me take this and keep it somewhere else for you." When I got down, I normally don't carry side things with me, so I took my handbag and I forgot all about it. So it's only at the immigration that I remembered I had a poster. It took another 3 hours before my poster could get into my hands. I was like, do I really want to do this? Why don't I just leave it and